Well, it's interesting how the federal government and the other major provinces are all going into second wave mode, shrinking the size of gatherings down to 10 people in parts of Ontario, going into condition orange in parts of Quebec. And yet we're carrying on here with an election which didn't need to happen. So I think it's a real disappointment to see that our Premier's got his own job security ahead of the health of British Columbians.
Hey everyone, welcome to Darpan Dialogue. The BC provincial election is set to take place on October the 24th. Premier John Horgan made the announcement and sparked outrage with the BC Greens and the BC Liberals, the opposition party. While to get his thoughts on exactly what this election will look like during the pandemic and why you still need to vote and what this exactly also means for British Columbians when it comes to the future of the province, we reached Andrew Wilkinson, the leader of the BC Liberals, the opposition party of BC. Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's very busy for you at the moment, and we truly appreciate it. So we'll get right into it. BC Premier John Horgan, a few weeks ago, there was a lot of chatter in the media as to there might be a possibility of him calling a snap election. Now, he confirmed that. Did you happen to think that it was going to be confirmed once you did hear rumors of a snap election?
Well, a week before the election was called, many of us were thinking it was a 5 or 10% chance of an election this fall because the COVID numbers were rising and have continued to rise, because there was no sign of any economic plan, because people were very worried about their future. We thought this was an exceptionally bad time to be calling an election. And then a week later, that 10% chance turned to 100%. And lo and behold, we're in the middle of an election that nobody wants. It's totally unnecessary because they have a deal with the Greens for another year, which they have broken. John Horgan passed a law saying that there's an election in October 2021, which he's now broken. And now he's coming up with a stream of dishonest excuses about squabbles with the Greens that the Greens are saying are utter nonsense. So we're here in an election, and we're off and running, and we're fighting it the right way, which is with a solid position, and we'll be coming up with a lot of strong policy content in the next couple of weeks.
Now that it's been confirmed, what sort of planning is happening as to how the election campaign is going to look like during the pandemic?
Well, we've very rapidly set up a studio that I'm in right now, and we have another one in another location, and we have assembled the necessary team to do this. And it's been a lot of hard work this week, but we're also grappling, as you point out, with the pandemic phenomenon. No large meetings, no rallies. Even if you go to an outdoor event, you'll have 3 or 4 people there. I think you've seen the news events with both John Horgan and me, where there's basically no one there except us and a single camera person from the media pool. So it's a rather lonely life compared to the usual busyness of a campaign. Plus, the number of events has been cut way back to essentially 1 media event per day for all parties, rather than having a lot of separate events where you're trying to meet people in their neighborhood. That's just not possible under the pandemic circumstances, which is yet another reason why we shouldn't be in an election right now.
Speaking of that, the Premier has said that he feels that this election can be held safely during the pandemic. Now, are you equally confident with that as well, that the health of BCers won't be put at risk during this election?
Well, it's interesting how the federal government and the other major provinces are all going into second wave mode, shrinking the size of gatherings down to 10 people in parts of Ontario, going into condition orange in parts of Quebec. And yet we're carrying on here with an election which didn't need to happen. So I think it's a real disappointment to see that our Premier's got his own job security ahead of the health of British Columbians.
Speaking of the health side of things, the NDP has accused the Liberals of selling land for the Surrey Hospital. What do you have to say to that?
Well, that's the silliest excuse I've ever heard for what's going on in Surrey. We took money from that land and built SFU Surrey Engineering. That's what happened with the money, because there's always budgetary money for important projects. And now we have John Horgan has been completely dishonest this week, saying that there's money in the 2020 budget for a Surrey hospital. I've got the document in front of me. It's 150 pages. There's not a single mention of a new Surrey hospital in there. And then he turned around and said that work on the business plan is proceeding as we speak. That's just nonsense, because the government's in caretaker mode where nothing proceeds except the most essential activities to keep people healthy and well. So it's a strange world where John Horgan comes up with these strange reasons and then invents things that simply aren't true. And we've seen quite a lot of that this week, and the Surrey media have been right on top of it, saying, but what you're saying, Mr. Horgan, just isn't true. You can't just make things up. We're in a crisis. You've got to tell the truth.
When it comes to the police force, there's been a lot of talk with the city of Surrey and the whole RCMP, the municipal police force. There's been a lot of back and forth. So what do you think that you will do in terms of transitioning for a municipal Surrey police force?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that over the past 2 years, this has become such a football. And we're very concerned that trust and transparency have fallen apart in Surrey. No matter who you talk to, there are suspicions. What's the real story? What are the real facts? Nobody seems to know. And so we lay this squarely at the feet of the NDP and their Solicitor General, Mike Farnworth, and all of those 6 Surrey MLAs, 3 of whom were cabinet ministers. How did you let it get this far? So to discuss this issue and review it appropriately and come to the right decision, there's going to have to be the reestablishment of trust, transparency, get a lot more information out there so people have a reasonable basis upon which to form their opinions. As I say, right now it's become this political football of he said, she said, and who said what to whom, and that's not serving anybody's interests right now. We need to clear the air, reestablish a trustworthy process, and fix this damage that the NDP have let build up over the 2 years that they've been in office on this issue.
The trustworthy process that you mentioned, what does that look like? Do you have a model in mind?
Well, you start with a whole bunch of information, and none of us know, certainly you and I don't know, what the information is on costing, transition issues, whether there'd be proper integration with the other neighboring police forces, what would happen to the existing police force members, and I gather there are about 800 of them. So these are big issues and big financial issues, and I certainly don't have any information on which to make a decision. I assume you don't either. So until that information gets out there, nobody's going to have the basis for a reasonable conversation. And that's what this is going to take, is a calm and measured conversation between all of the interested people with full information, not with tidbits and rumors and gossip.
You know, and people don't really like change. So what would you say to voters as to what are your 3 top pitches as to why they should vote for you?
Well, our top priority in this election is to reestablish the confidence of British Columbians, to come up with that plan to rebuild British Columbia, to reestablish optimism so people have things to look forward to. Think of yourself as a flight attendant or a tourism operator or someone who's in transient work or someone at the lower level of the income scale. Your life is extremely vulnerable right now. People in tears wondering where their life is going. So we're going to be talking about things that will really make a difference. Tax relief for everybody. Childcare plan that's workable for everybody, unlike the failed NDP plan, which they like to talk about, and talk about things like affordability and transportation. This is a time to be ambitious. It's a time to reestablish that confidence we all need and that we used to have. And we're very concerned that the NDP plan is really just band-aids on a major problem. We're deep in a crisis, and I think most people realize that, but they've been a little hesitant to come to conclusions that they might because it's bad news. So let's reestablish that opportunity for good news, for opportunity to be built in British Columbia, for people to have a spring in their step, to make life exciting again in BC. That's the task of the provincial government. We're up to it, and we hope to gain people's support to do so.
All right, Andrew Wilkinson, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We truly appreciate it.
Thanks for your time. Always great to see you.
Thank you.
Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe.